a fisherman found a strange, ancient coffin washed up on a remote island. When he opened it, he burst into tears immediately. Veteran fisherman Michael Brennan was navigating the cold, choppy waters off the coast of Maine, checking his lobster traps near an uninhabited, windswept island when he noticed something peculiar on the rocky shore. It was a dark, ornate, and strangely human-shaped object wedged among the rocks where the tide had left it. Drawing his boat closer, he discovered it was a weathered, cast-iron coffin, covered in barnacles and the rust of a century at sea. What he would find inside this impossible discovery was not a gruesome scene, but a perfectly preserved time capsule from the Victorian era, a treasure trove so valuable and so unexpected that it would change the humble fisherman's life forever. To understand the mystery of the iron coffin, we must first journey back to the world of the 19th century and its unique, and to our modern eyes, often morbid, relationship with death. The Victorian era was a time of high mortality rates. Diseases we now consider treatable were often a death sentence, and the loss of a loved one, especially a child, was an all too common part of life. This constant proximity to death created a culture of elaborate and deeply sentimental mourning. People would commission post-mortem photographs of their deceased family members, especially children, posing them as if they were merely sleeping. A lock of a loved one's hair would be intricately woven into a piece of jewelry to be worn as a constant reminder. Grief was a public and highly ritualized performance. But beneath the sentimentality lay a very real and very pragmatic set of fears: the fear of disease spreading from the dead and the fear of grave robbers. In the mid-19th century, before the advent of modern embalming techniques, a decomposing body was a significant public health risk, especially for contagious diseases like cholera or yellow fever. There was a desperate need for a way to safely contain the deceased. At the same time, the medical schools of the era had a voracious and often unscrupulous demand for cadavers for anatomical study. This led to the rise of a grim profession, the resurrectionist or the body snatcher. These men would secretly dig up freshly buried corpses and sell them to doctors and universities. For families, the idea of their loved one's final resting place being desecrated was a profound horror. It was in response to these two great fears, disease and desecration, that an inventor named Fisk created a revolutionary and iconic artifact of the era, the Fisk metallic burial case. Patented in 1848, the Fisk coffin was a masterpiece of Victorian engineering and design. It was not a simple box. It was an airtight cast-iron sarcophagus, molded to the shape of the human body, resembling an Egyptian mummy's case. Its most distinctive feature was a small oval glass plate, or window, positioned directly over the face of the deceased, allowing for a final, safe, and sentimental viewing without the risk of contagion. These iron coffins were expensive, a luxury item for the wealthy. They became a status symbol, a way to show that a family had the means to provide their loved one with the ultimate in eternal security. They were also incredibly effective. The airtight seal slowed the process of decomposition dramatically and made them nearly impossible for grave robbers to break into. It was one of these strange, historic, and incredibly rare iron coffins that Michael Brennan had just found on a deserted island. Our story's protagonist, Michael Brennan, was a man whose life was written by the sea. He was a veteran lobster fisherman, a man in his late 60s who knew the rugged, island-studded coast of Maine better than his own backyard. On a cool autumn morning, he was making his way back to port after a long day of checking his traps. He decided to take a shortcut through a channel near a small, uninhabited island, a place of granite cliffs and windswept pines that most boaters avoided. As his boat rounded a rocky point, he saw it. The dark, vaguely human shape on the shore was jarringly out of place. He cut his engine and drifted closer. He could see now that it was some kind of old metal casket, its surface a dark canvas of rust and marine growth. His first thought was that it was a grim discovery from a more recent tragedy. Unsure what to do, Michael radioed the local Coast Guard patrol. He described his location and the strange antique-looking coffin he had found. The officer on the other end of the line was initially perplexed. He advised Michael to keep a safe distance and said they would dispatch a boat to investigate, but that it could take several hours. But Michael, a man of the sea, was also a man of stories and legends. He had grown up with local tales of pirates, shipwrecks, and lost treasure. The curiosity was too powerful to resist. He had to know what was inside. As he waited, he recalled the old tales of sailors burying their captains on deserted islands with their treasures. By the time he saw the distant shape of the patrol boat on the horizon, he had already made his decision. He beached his own small boat and, with his heart pounding, approached the iron coffin. The lid was held fast by a series of rusted but still formidable bolts. He returned to his boat and grabbed a heavy crowbar. The work was difficult. The iron was thick, and the bolts were fused by a century and a half of salt and time. But with a final great effort and the sharp screech of protesting metal, the last bolt gave way. He placed the tip of the crowbar under the heavy lid. He took a deep breath and began to pry it open. With a final desperate heave on the crowbar, the last of the century-old bolts gave way with a sharp metallic groan. The heavy iron lid, free for the first time in over 150 years, was pushed open. A rush of stale, musty air, the trapped breath of the 19th century, escaped from within. Michael Brennan, his heart pounding in his chest, leaned over and shone his flashlight into the dark interior. His fear of a gruesome discovery instantly vanished, replaced by a sense of profound, jaw-dropping disbelief. There was no perfectly preserved body staring back at him. The airtight seal had failed at some point over the long decades at sea, and all that was left of the original occupant was the dark, disintegrated remnants of a burial shroud. But arranged carefully around this dust of a person long gone was a breathtaking, impossible sight. The beam of his flashlight danced across a king's ransom of Victorian-era treasure. There were stacks of heavy gold coins, their surfaces still gleaming with a soft, buttery light. There were ornate silver chalices, tarnished but still beautiful, and there was a stunning collection of jewelry, heavy gold lockets, pearl necklaces, and rings set with precious stones, all glittering in the sudden, intrusive light of his flashlight. Michael fell back onto the rocky shore, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. He was not a treasure hunter, he was a lobster fisherman, but he knew with absolute certainty that he had just stumbled upon a discovery that would change his life forever. Overwhelmed by a tidal wave of shock, relief, and pure, dumbfounded awe, he simply sat there on the rocks, and as the Coast Guard patrol boat grew larger on the horizon, he burst into tears. When the authorities arrived, they were met with a scene that none of them had ever encountered before. They secured the site and, with the help of local historians and archaeologists who were quickly brought in, began the careful process of documenting and removing the content. The experts confirmed Michael's initial assessment. The coffin was a genuine Fisk metallic burial case from the mid-19th century. The coins, the silver, and the jewelry were all authenticated as belonging to the same Victorian era. But the greatest mystery remained. How did a priceless, treasure-filled coffin from a wealthy 19th century family end up washed ashore on a remote, uninhabited island in Maine? The investigation into the coffin's origin began. The historians and archaeologists pieced together the most likely theory. This was not a case of a local cemetery eroding into the sea. A heavy iron coffin like this would sink, not float. The only logical explanation was that the coffin had been cargo on a ship that had sunk off the coast of Maine over a century ago. In the Victorian era, with the advent of railroads and steamships, it became common for wealthy families to transport the bodies of their deceased loved ones long distances to be buried in the family's ancestral plot. The airtight, secure, and dignified iron coffin was the perfect vessel for such a journey. The experts concluded that a wealthy family, perhaps from Boston or New York, had been transporting their deceased relative for burial and had placed their valuable personal effects inside the coffin with them as a final act of devotion, a common practice for the sentimental Victorians. The ship carrying this precious cargo was likely caught in one of the powerful nor'easter storms that plagued the coast and sank without a trace, taking the coffin with it to the bottom of the sea. For over a century, the iron coffin rested in the silent darkness of the seafloor, its story forgotten. Then, a recent powerful hurricane or winter storm likely disturbed the old shipwreck, dislodging the heavy coffin from its resting place. Pushed along by powerful underwater currents, it was finally, after 150 years, tumbled onto the rocky shore of the island where Michael Brennan had found it. With the historical mystery solved, the final chapter of the story was a legal one. Because the original owners of the treasure were unknown and could never be identified, and because the coffin was recovered from the sea, the case fell under maritime salvage law. Michael Brennan, as the person who discovered the wreck and honorably reported it to the authorities, was legally entitled to a significant portion of its value. The collection was professionally appraised, and its total value was confirmed to be over $2 million. As per the law, Michael received a finder's fee of 30% of the total value, a sum that transformed the humble fisherman's modest life. The story of the iron coffin is a powerful testament to the enduring secrets that the ocean holds. A tragic shipwreck from a bygone era, a family's lost loved one, and a treasure of gold and silver all lay hidden for generations, waiting for a combination of a powerful storm and the curious eye of a lone fisherman to bring them back into the light. It's a reminder that history is not just in books, it is all around us, sometimes resting just beneath the waves, waiting for its story to be told.